Speaking of scams, we've got to turn to Justice Roberts, who's the greatest scam artist in American history. I'm the only one in the media to have told you that the reason he turned coat like this was probably for two reasons only. One of two reasons only. One, he was blackmailed by someone, or two, he was responding to the medication he was on, which affected his judgment or his comprehension of things. The more I think about it, the more I realize that the Roberts precedent, so-called, is total baloney. In fact, what shocks me the most is that everyone's quoting the Roberts precedent as something important. And no one seems to mention the Schechter brothers case from 1939, which I talked about on the show for 2 years now from my book, Trickle Up Poverty. I have to ask you, why do you think that the Supreme Court case, the Schechter brothers case from 1939, where small, lowly butchers stood up to Roosevelt, the central government guy, and they won, and Justice Brandeis, one of the greatest legal minds of all modern times, let's say, said to Roosevelt's aide, let this be the end of centralization of everything. Why do you suppose neither Limbaugh nor any of the other lights of the conservative side have ever mentioned the Schechter brothers case? There's only one reason. It's because their hatred and fear of Michael Savage is so great that they couldn't even mention a case that would have done the conservative movement good, which shows you that at the end of the day, it's all self-interest.
We're going to lose it all, folks. Unless some people get their head in the game and get focused on what really has happened here and what is happening, it's all going to go down the tubes. No, this silly debate whether it's a penalty or a tax, looking for silver linings, what the heck does it matter? All of that's irrelevant. You're wasting your time talking about whether it's a penalty or a tax. Most of you are getting a little annoyed and fed up at this Republican argument over whether it's a tax or whether it's a penalty, or, wow, there's some silver linings in this. We are going to have to get focused on the disaster that this Supreme Court ruling is, and we're going to have to admit it, and the sooner the better. Because this is ball game. This changes this country forever and for the worse. There is nothing positive or good in Obamacare. There's nothing in it. I don't care if you want to keep your kid on your policy to 26, pre-existing condition. Those two things are not worth the accompanying transformation and destruction of what has been known as the United States of America. Just as before the Supreme Court ruled, nothing has changed in terms of what this legislation is. The court didn't change a thing. It's still Obamacare. It's still going to force everybody into inferior health care services at a higher price. It still undermines the Constitution. It is long lines. It is red tape. It's delays in care. It's denials of coverage. Less cutting-edge drugs. Less money for investment into innovation. It depletes Medicare. It forces young people to pay into another entitlement they will rarely use. The key to this is explaining to people why this law is so bad from a health care perspective. That's what this is about. As I say, folks, it's destroying the greatest healthcare system in the world. We are left with Obamacare, and we are left with a damaged Constitution. And we have a Republican leadership that's clueless in how to slow any of this down. They refuse to accept the reality of what's going on. And so they try to dress it up. They look for silver linings. If I've heard this once, I've heard this 1,000 times. Well, this decision throws it back into the legislative arena. Really? You know, if something's unconstitutional, the legislative and presidential branches have violated the Constitution. It's the role of the judiciary to uphold the Constitution, not throw it back to the corrupt bunch that created it in the first place. If Chief Justice Roberts had wanted to throw this back to Congress, you know what he would have done? he would have repealed it. And then he would have said, if you really want it, you go back and do it right. If he had been paying attention to the Constitution, if he really wanted to throw this back to the legislative branch, where the elected representatives of the people take care of this, he would have repealed it, and he would have said to the elected representatives of the people, you presented us with an unconstitutional bill, and none of it stands, and you go back and you fix it. Instead, he upheld it. I don't care how, penalty, tax, what, he upheld it. It's the law of the land. The damage that was done to the Constitution cannot be fixed by repealing Obamacare. That's going to stand no matter what we end up doing with Obamacare. Chief Justice Roberts and the 4 other liberal activists on the court have blown yet another giant hole through the Constitution. How do we fix that? We lost a huge case in the Supreme Court. There is no silver lining. What now has to happen is we regroup. We have to inform as many fellow citizens as possible what is in store for them. Their freedom, their health care, their lives, the lives of their children and grandchildren, if this stands. And we have to stop deluding ourselves if we are to beat this back. We can fight to repeal Obamacare. And we must. But we have to win the next election big. And we can't tolerate any Republican capitulating in advance of this fight or accepting any aspect of Obama. Folks, I'm sorry. Realville. It's all got to go.